was a music born of their circumstances. And that was one of the circumstances, the lack of instruments. It was also part of a way of social networking. It was a non-violent alternative to street gangs, which some of them were also in. It was just part of the social network of life in post-World War II America in urban settings for African-American young men. It was drawing from previous traditions, which weren't necessarily a cappella. For instance, with the Cadillacs, their most famous ballad was called Gloria, and that was based on a recording that they knew by the Mills Brothers. So it was a pop record created through the filter of singing on the street corner.
Gloria is not Jerry. Gloria, but she's not lost.
Doo Wop was incredibly simple music. Musicians who had to play behind them constantly complained about the 3 chord changes, the candy chord changes they always had to use in Doo Wop songs, and hundreds of Doo Wop songs had the same 3 chord changes. And if you talk to musicians from the period, you know, they said, you know, it was staggeringly simple and stupid.
I knew from the start that you were the only girl for me, and I knew from the start that I was the love that was just meant to be. And
On the other hand, if you listen to the way they blended their voices, there was a lot of musical creativity. It wasn't complex music to play, but I think it was complex music to sing.
Despite the huge success of doo-wop bands and young stars such as Frankie Lyman, and a revival of the genre in the early 60s, notable for a host of Italian-American and all-white vocal groups, its position at the forefront of the mainstream was not to last.
February 1964, the Beatles come to America, the British invasion, and that really sort of was the end of the first part of rhythm and blues. Lead singers of those groups are really what you listen to, Diana Ross and the Supremes, right? And even with the Temptations, where you had a couple different lead singers, they were really the focus of what you were hearing. The legacy is in there. And even with the English groups, you know, the Beatles, they were big fans of the Coasters and a lot of those groups. And so you hear those harmonies, but just as important were the guitars. It became a thing of the past. And so by the end of that decade, doo-wop became synonymous with nostalgia for the 50s.
That music was so pure and for real, and it was no more than just good old American music, man. It's music that you could fall in love to. It was music that you could dance to. You can relate to the lyrics, would fit your situation. And it was good times, happy times, you know. Boom, boom, boom.
Now they often call me Speedo, but my real name is
It was just something that everybody could relate to. You know, lyrics-wise, to most of the songs, and the love things. I mean, everybody was in love at that time, you know, or thought they were.
I remember the girl I used to go with. When that song
came out,
yeah,
right.
You know, and you know, things like that.
Yeah. Oh, I was so in love when that song came out. Yeah. And it relates to a part of your life, really, that you were doing at the time.
Right.
And everything just seems to fall right in place.
And it was this very particular sound that Zappa would often turn to, adding yet another string to his musical bow. Although from Freak Out onwards, doo-wop was a genre that Zappa would often throw into the mix. With 1968's Cruising with Reuben and the Jets, he even produced an entire album's worth of vocal harmony material. To some, his experiments with doo-wop have been seen as pure satire. But this was in fact a musical form for which he had a very real affection.
True adoration is not frightened of being silly, and people confuse that with having a sarcastic or negative attitude towards the material. And I don't think there is that in Frank's attitude towards Doo Wop. I think he completely adored it and totally embraced its silly aspects as something that he loved and wanted other people to love as well.
It was the music of his youth. I think, like so many people who were fans of Doo Wop, there's something about it, the music, that really speaks of sort of being young, sort of the desire and the yearning of being a young person. And I think he connected with that. I mean, he was somebody that got into this really sophisticated kind of music, but I think he probably had this sort of sentimental side in a way, and he heard that music and it really touched something inside of him, you know. And he also used it to comic effect, you know, like on one of my favorite albums, We're Only in It for the Money, there was a song called What's the Ugliest Part of Your Body? I don't know if you know this song, but it's kind of a doo-wop song.
And for those musicians brought into the Mothers of Invention who had classical backgrounds, doo-wop was both uncharted territory and also, for some, a challenge to their concepts of taste.
Totally not my schooling, totally no information on my part about where it came from, what it was, but really a lot of fun to play and to do.